It's a two-part question, actually. One is, what do you consider to be the greatest challenge facing the United States today? Many people, for example, may have given a different answer not too long ago, but what do you think that greatest challenge is? And second, given what you just described with related to Donald Trump, how would a Jacksonian foreign policy approach those difficult issues?
Okay, those are two huge questions, but I'll try to take a brief and succinct whack at them. I actually think, and this, you may think that the warm air and sunshine has sort of gone to my permacloud besotted head, but I would make the argument that the United States, despite ISIS, despite Russia, and despite Rocket Man in North Korea, is in a relatively secure strategic position. When you compare the military capability of our actual or potential adversaries today with the good old days of the Soviet Union, there's no comparison. During the Cold War, we lived in a world in which between the United States and the Soviet Union, there were about 65,000 nuclear warheads. I mean, we had such overkill that we could have literally ended life as we know it on this planet, not once, but probably about 15 times. And the Soviet Union was a real military threat beyond just its nuclear capability. There was a director of the CIA in the 90s, Jim Woolsey, who testified in front of Congress and said that the key challenge that we faced in the immediate post-Cold War period was we'd gone from a world in which we faced lions and tigers and bears to a world in which we faced snakes and adders. Now, lions, tigers, and bears can eat you. Snakes and adders, especially if you get quick medical treatment, turn out to be more of annoyance. And I think when you go across the board, most of the threats that we're facing today are more along the lines of an annoyance than an existential threat. And so for me, the big danger for us, this is the old Walt Kelly line from Pogo, we have met the enemy and the enemy is us. The danger is that we will overreact. We overreacted after 9/11, and don't get me wrong, we had to react in some fashion after 9/11. But we overreacted in two really significant ways. One was we had to go into Afghanistan, we had to overthrow the Taliban, but somehow mission creep took over and we decided that running Al-Qaeda out of Dodge and overthrowing the Taliban wasn't enough, and we had to get into nation building in Afghanistan. What led us to think that we could make a state out of a perpetually failed state? But we committed ourselves to doing that, and then we decided within a year and a half that we were going to invade Iraq. A country that had no connection with 9/11, had no Al-Qaeda presence to speak of prior to our overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and which also turned out not to have weapons of mass destruction, which was the pretext for that invasion. And it's not just those countries. Libya, and I say this as somebody who was on the wrong side of the decision to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya, and I'm no apologist for Gaddafi. I think he's a rotten skunk, or was a rotten skunk. But I think most everybody would admit today, from the perspective of 2017, that the only thing worse than the benighted Gaddafi despotism was the chaos in that country today. So, big threat we face is that we'll do something dumb. We have real threats out there that we have to meet using military and diplomatic tools, but we've also got to be careful not to overreach. And my take on the period in American foreign policy from the early 90s until quite recently has been a lot of overreach.
When you talk about real threats, hope you can hear me okay. Mitt Romney in 2012 said in a presidential debate that he thought the greatest geopolitical threat was Russia. Last year during the campaign, many of the political candidates, I believe even President Trump, talked about ISIS. Recently, particularly this past week and in recent months, I think the national concern has been a lot about North Korea, not only because of their nuclear capability, but because of, I think many people in this country question how rational they are. At least pre-1991, when it was the Soviet Union versus the United States, it was terrifying, but it was rational, right? I can remember in the 1960s, we would have those, I don't know why hiding under a desk at a Catholic school would have saved us.
Duck and cover.
But that's what we did. I can still remember, we'd go to Mass and then we'd hide under the desk. I guess that's the right order.
Right.
And so, but it was terrifying, but you knew that you knew they were rational. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think what is unsettling to many people is ISIS appears to be completely irrational, if not insane. And people worry about the same thing with North Korea. And then, of course, Russia, which some people are concerned about as far as their support for Assad and for Iran, and of course, North Korea. So among those three, which do you think is the greatest concern? And what does a Trump foreign policy do with these challenging problems?
Okay, just to be, sort of contentious about this, but Rick, you're a young man, and your memory of the Cold War is sort of bounded. I mean, I'm guessing you sort of woke up in like the mid 1970s, Cold War. But the Cold War began much earlier. Remember, the first new nuclear power was the Soviet Union. They exploded an A-bomb in 1947, and then the hydrogen bomb in 1953. Who was the dictator of the Soviet Union during that period? The answer is Uncle Joe Stalin, one of the great mass murderers of all time. Second big proliferation issue, the first real rogue state, was Mao's China. In fact, Mao was so crazy about nuclear weapons in the 50s when China didn't have them that he was always going to Moscow and bugging the Russians for not being bolshy enough in fighting capitalism. And Nikita Khrushchev, who was Stalin's successor, said, hey, you got to chill, Mao. If we get into a war with the United States and it escalates to nuclear exchanges, hundreds of millions of people are going to die. Well, Mao had a theory, which is that if there was a nuclear war between the communist world and the capitalist West, and 200 million people died on both sides, the communist world would still come out ahead because China had so many surplus people. I mean, this is just lunacy. So it was so crazy that the Soviets at one point came to the United States in the 1960s and said, we can't let these crazy Chinese have nuclear weapons. I mean, imagine what they'll do with them. And the United States and the Soviet Union came close to agreeing to launch a joint preemptive strike against Mao's China. Okay, so fast forward today. China is actually one of the most moderate nuclear powers in the world. They have a very small arsenal of about 200 nuclear warheads. Their doctrine is that nuclear weapons are good for one thing, which is deterring another nuclear power from attacking us with nuclear weapons, and that's all we're going to do with it. So the only thing that I'm saying is that we talk about rogue states and crazy people. There was nobody crazier or more bloodthirsty than Mao and Stalin. But their acquisition of nuclear weapons did not end up ending the world. Now, Kim Jong-un, I mean, this guy's got a bad haircut, but More worrisome to me is the one American he gets along with is Dennis Rodman. That's what keeps me awake at night. That's his view of the West. But I think, people say, this guy is nutty. And I won't dispute that he's nutty. But I also think he's sort of crazy like a fox. He's got one objective, which has been the family business, which is to maintain a stranglehold on this poor, benighted country of North Korea. And I think he's rational the same way Al Capone was rational. He wants nuclear weapons to preserve his dictatorship, but once he has them, I think both we can deter him and his ambitions will not extend beyond, preserving his, corrupt family business. So I think we got to put our concern about new nuclear powers in the context of, we've sort of heard this story before, and it has not proven to be as catastrophic as we initially worried it would be.
Let me shift a little bit to your presentation about the Trump foreign policy in his first year. You talked about it being more Jacksonian. And this question is not meant to be disrespectful to the president when I ask it. But is there a...
But disrespectful to me.
No. No, it's to the... When I ask this question is there a strategy? And by that I mean, I think both domestically and in foreign policy, many people wonder, is there an actual coherent set of principles that are guiding his decision-making, or is it all ad hoc? And that's wondered particularly domestically, but even in foreign policy. And there's a sense, of course, that, and you talk about this some, that he rejects establishment foreign policy. But when the actual action comes, as opposed to his 2016 speech, fairly traditional in Afghanistan and sending in troops, fairly traditional Republican doctrine of wanting to increase military spending, fairly traditional saber rattling on NATO, but comes back home on NATO. And so, you knew that with Reagan there were guiding principles, even with President Obama, different guiding principles. I know it's Jacksonian, but when the action comes, do you really think there's a Trump doctrine here? And what is it? Is it Jacksonian? And how does that translate into foreign policy issues today?
Yeah, well, Rick, you're absolutely right that the foreign policy of the United States is the result of a number of things. It's a result of what the president thinks he wants and tries to do. It's also the result of the bureaucracy and the interests of the not only the government but sort of the foreign policy establishment more generally. And so all those things are going on. But I also think that presidents have leeway. And so the president's vision or how they think the world works matters. It's not always going to overcome the establishment foreign policy or the bureaucratic vested interests of various parts of the bureaucracy. But it does matter, and it does move the dial. And I think you can see the Trump doctrine in operation in a number of things. First of all, trade policy. I don't think that President Trump is anti-trade, but he doesn't like multilateral trade agreements like NAFTA or the TPP. I mean, he likes bilateral trade because I think he's more confident that in a bilateral framework we can make sure that America's interests are being advanced in this particular realm. Secondly, I think that especially with respect to NATO, his raising the long-standing issue of burden sharing has had an effect. The Europeans are, they've woken up and they've said, geez, maybe he really means it in a way that the Europeans have not believed that since the 1960s we've meant that they really ought to be contributing an equal burden to NATO. And thirdly, I think Afghanistan notwithstanding, you're not going to see another Iraq under Donald Trump. I mean, I think he's Jacksonian enough that he's not going to get committed to a long-term program of nation building and political transformation. So in that sense, I think what the president believes really does matter. The interesting question for me is how much is, this Donald Trump versus how much is this Donald Trump reacting to his political base? And this isn't to in any way try to minimize his political achievement. I mean, he found a segment of the American electorate that both parties had ignored and who were mad as hell, and he addressed issues that they were concerned about. And I think you see it shaping his foreign policy agenda, but also his domestic agenda as well.
Oh, by the way, I'm going to ask a couple more questions, but if you in the audience have a few questions you'd like to ask, we'll keep it very brief.
Rebuttals, ad hominem attacks.
But there will be an opportunity with the microphone to ask in just a second. I do want to shift very briefly to North Korea because it was in the news so much this week. I'm sure as everyone here was reading, earlier in the week there was the launch of this missile, this ICBM, higher than before, according to many of the technical people, can reach the East Coast, caused a lot of concern with many. North Korea portrayed it one way. The experts say they're still a ways off, but few dispute the fact that they're on track to have full nuclear capability. And one of the great questions is, obviously, is what threat do they pose, but what are our options? The president seems to talk with some confidence that he will take care of it, which suggests that maybe he's aware of a technology or military option that some of us may not be aware of, but what are the options available, and how big is this threat?
Well, I think, there's a lot of evidence that the president has been advised by his senior national security team that, in fact, there isn't a good military option. So eliminating the North Korean threat by military force, I think, is pretty much off the table at this point. And the approach that the president has been taking, ironically, has been more diplomatic. I mean, the president is really betting the farm on the North Korean issue on the Chinese. Sure. And he has good personal chemistry with President Xi. And so if there's any hope of freezing the North Korean program, it's by diplomacy with China. But I don't think there's a military option, a viable military option on the table. I think the president, if there was one, would be behaving very differently than he is at this point. For me, I think that it's inevitable that the North Koreans will develop a small nuclear capability that can threaten the territory of the United States. That's the bad news. The good news is it's never going to be very big, and the United States is always going to have the big trump card in its back pocket, no pun intended, of a large and robust nuclear arsenal of our own. And so there's no way that the North Koreans are ever going to be able to use nuclear weapons against the United States and not risk eliminating the very existence of their country. And I'm confident enough in deterrence to think that'll work. You asked me what keeps me awake. What keeps me awake about North Korea is not deterring North Korea. What keeps me awake at night is I think that the Kim regime is ultimately very brittle. I don't think it's going to go away in a year or 5 years or even 10 years. But at some point, it's going to go. And when brittle, long-term authoritarian regimes collapse, it's really ugly. And the key danger that we face is when that happens, there is going to be a scramble into North Korea that could create huge problems. And there'll be three big actors. The United States will want to go north to secure the North Korean nuclear arsenal. The Chinese will want to go into Korea to prevent Korea from becoming unified under South Korea. And of course, the South Koreans want to go and get the nuclear weapons and unify Korea. And so the long-term challenge we face is how do we avoid this huge mess when the inevitable happens? And in fact, some people I know who worked in the on China issues and East Asia issues in the second Bush administration confirmed to me that the United States has been consistently trying to engage China on the day after. And I think that that's a very important issue. And we could get it right. It could be like, what Brent Scowcroft and George H.W. Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev did to manage German unification at the end of the Cold War. The other issue that keeps me awake is Pakistan. Pakistan is an ally of ours, although I put ally in scare quotes with allies like this, who needs enemies. They have a significant nuclear arsenal, probably about 100 nuclear warheads. They have a long-term rivalry with another nuclear power, India. And it's also a deeply corrupt and fragile regime. One that, by the way, is up to its ears in Islamic extremists. And if you were to go and break into the offices of the Joint Staff in the Pentagon and rummage through the war plans and look for the most highly classified contingency plans that we have, my prediction is it would be the planning that we're doing on the contingency of a major collapse in Pakistan and how we would secure the Pakistani nuclear arsenal. That could be a mess.
We have time for...
Actually, kind of amazing that you just touched upon the possibly breaking in and that whole kind of thing. With President Trump being the first president that's had a phone that's unprotected and able to do what he does with Twitter and all of that, I've always kind of wondered why it hasn't ever been a thought that something like that could happen through his own personal phone with the different issues with Russia and all of those kind of things. If that something like that were to happen, because you can hack into just about anything now, and you have a live phone at 3 a.m. that tweets about all kinds of things. You don't see that as an issue. You sound very confident that things are going to go well. So I just thought, do you have any kind of input on that?
Well, I think a lot of things could go bad, but that's one of the few that I don't worry so much about. First of all, I think President Trump's great strength is that he has nothing to hide. He basically says whatever.
Kind of wish you would sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I mean, his life is an open book, and he's happy to talk about things that most of the rest of us would never broach. And so, it's not like he's vulnerable to blackmail. You have to have shame to be subject to blackmail. Second thing is that I think the president is resistant to the bureaucracy, and a lot of the legitimate secrets in government are kept within the bureaucracy, and so the likelihood that if somebody hacked into his Twitter account, first of all, how would we know that the tweet didn't come from him? And secondly, would there be anything else on that cell phone that people couldn't get from reading his tweets or from his other public statements? And so I guess I'm less or more sanguine about that than I would be about other sorts of issues. Please.
Sure.
I think our question was more specifically about cybersecurity. The problem with a bullet and a nuclear bomb is it makes a lot of noise. But the difference about a hack is why you can actually deploy a hack all the time. You can't store nuclear weapons all the time.
No, you're absolutely right, and cyber warfare is this is the cutting edge of conflict. I'm not sure if it's war or not, but the truth of the matter is that cyber attacks are an ongoing fact of life for every American and for every business anywhere around the world. And so it's a big problem. It costs lots of money. That's the bad news. The good news, though, is cyber as a weapon is actually more limited in capability, at least in terms of producing kinetic effects, than I think most people realize. And let me give you an example. The most successful campaign of kinetic cyber warfare was the joint U.S. and Israeli program called Olympic Games against the Iranian nuclear infrastructure. And really, it was a remarkable exercise in intelligence and in cyber warfare. What we basically did was hack into the internal computer system that controlled the uranium enrichment centrifuges at the Iranian facility in Natanz. And we programmed them to subtly change how they operated and end up breaking down. Okay, so it was a remarkable accomplishment just in terms of tradecraft. You know what the effect of it, though, was on the Iranian nuclear program? Zilch. It wasn't even a speed bump. At the time that we were taking down and sabotaging, literally hundreds of centrifuge cascades, the level of enriched uranium was continuing to go up. But okay, so one of the other big public examples of a successful cyber hack was the North Korean attack against Sony Pictures. And I'm sure it cost Sony money, and it cost them a lot of embarrassment. But again, in the grand scheme of things, would we say that this demonstrates that cyber is an existential threat to the United States? Final thing I'll say is if you were to ask me who are the most capable cyber operators in the world, I would say the United States is far and above any of our adversaries, including Russia, including North Korea, and including China. And so I don't want to say that this isn't an important issue. I think it's a huge issue, but it's also, I think, an issue whose implications are very different than a lot of other traditional national security issues.
I do want to take maybe one or two more questions. And do you have one? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Amanda. Is there any extradition treaties between Russia and U.S. for intellectual property in cybercrime? If so, are there any plans pretty much for it to happen in the future?
I don't know. I am guessing that the United States and Russia are both parties to various international agreements governing intellectual property, but this is way far from my area of expertise. And even though I'm spending the night in the Holiday Inn Express, I can't claim expertise.
Let me ask you a quick question on today's news. I found it fairly, well, I guess in some ways not surprising, but it happened. The news on Tillerson and the potential shakeup. Do you have any comments on what you think, what that's about? Of course, we know the roots of that, recent conflicts in a number of areas, and what it may mean for Trump foreign policy. Any comments on the news today reported in the New York Times that there appears to be a plan, at least according to today's reporting, that probably around the first of the year, if not sooner, that you will see the ouster of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State, and you'll see some changes going on in the leadership of the Trump administration when it comes to foreign policy. Any comments on that?
Well, there's been a lot of churn in the Trump world, and I guess it's not surprising that the Secretary of State might get caught up in this churn as well. But I think it's more of an issue of personalities than a issue of differences on policy. So one of the things, sort of the first shot across the bow that President Trump shot at Secretary Tillerson was to say that Tillerson seemed too optimistic about what the Chinese could do for us in North Korea. And a lot of people are reading the tea leaves and are thinking, okay, well, this means the president doesn't think that diplomacy is going to get us anywhere in terms of dealing with the North Korean nuclear threat. I actually think that's wrong. I think the problem was not that it was diplomacy, but rather that it was Tillerson, rather than the president himself who was driving the train on that. So I wouldn't see a big change in the direction of U.S. foreign policy if Secretary Tillerson is out tomorrow and Director of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, is in after the new year. This is about the president's management style, which is has a high rate of turnover in his staff. But anything I've ever heard about how he ran his private business suggested that it was based on personal relations and that a lot of people were in and out. And so,
one more question from our audience.
Yep. Good evening, sir. I was curious to get your thoughts about the FISA courts and the Patriot Act and how data collection might change or be the same under Trump.
That is a huge and a hugely important issue, because one of the legacies of the post 9/11 response has been a very significant constriction on the civil liberties of American citizens. And this is an issue, by the way, that is bipartisan in terms of people getting worried about it. You get a lot of conservatives, a lot of, especially libertarian types who are really concerned about to the extent to which the government now has access to elements of our communications, broadly defined, and what that means in terms of what they know about our lives and how much privacy we have. I don't think the Trump administration is going to change this. The big problem is, I think, with Congress. And the problem has been that Congress, or the modal member of Congress, is sort of caught between the horns of the dilemma. Nobody wants to vote against a potential program that somebody could argue would make us safer. But the problem with FISA and with all of the supporting architecture, legal architecture around it, is it's very complicated. It's very complicated legally, and it's very complicated technologically. It's just very easy for members of Congress to say, I don't want to think very hard about this. It's going to hurt my brain, and it's not a winner to get involved in it. So I think we're going to see a continuing encroachment in areas of our personal lives that, if we thought really hard about it, we would be quite uncomfortable with. I'd also say that the people in the intelligence community, and I was at a meeting at Fort Meade at NSA headquarters where I heard the number 2 person say that even at NSA they're worried about these issues because they don't think that Congress, which is where the privacy-security trade-off really needs to be debated in our political system, is fully engaged both with what the technology can do and what the appropriate legal architecture would be to govern it. So that's one of these issues that's, like a big blue whale swimming just below the surface of the ocean that most people aren't thinking about. But, there was just in the paper this week, a court case involving, again, Apple and the federal government trying to get Apple to cooperate with unlocking a individual's cell phone. And what you can generate in terms of knowledge about somebody's personal life from just their cell phone is unbelievable. Which, by the way, why I'm always on the straight and narrow.
Yes. Well, speaking of the straight, Dr. Desch, we're out of time for tonight, but do you have any concluding comments, any brief comments you'd like to make to the group regarding this topic and the Trump foreign policy?
Well, I think I would just conclude by, first of all, conveying the greetings of all of us on campus at Notre Dame to the alums and the Subway alums and the Friends of Notre Dame here at the Jacksonville Notre Dame Club. One of the great things about being a faculty member at Notre Dame is you not only have terrific students when they're there, but you also have an incredibly engaged alumni base. And not a lot of universities can claim to have all of those things together. Secondly, I just want to congratulate you on your partnership with Rick and with Jacksonville University in doing these Hesburgh lectures together. I've done many Hesburgh lectures over the years, but you guys, I love all my children equally, but I think you guys really do a spiffy program, and the fact that you're working with a fine institution here is just a force multiplier. So thank you for all you do for Notre Dame, and thanks for your kind invitation to Jacksonville.